the explorers that came over and set up fishing colonies, now they're interfering with their food supply. There's a lot of violence, fighting over this territory, fighting over places to hunt and fish. Even to the extent that at some point the government was offering, or the people who are now existing there, the governance structure, they were offering that, hey, if you kill a Beothuk person, you bring us back their scalp, right? Which is like cutting from your forehead, peeling that back. Terrible. That you would be rewarded for that. They would pay you out. Okay. And it's believed that in 1829, the last Beothuk individual died. So another aspect of cultural contact, the suppression of different cultural practices. So in some other slides eventually later on, I have more information about the Potlatch Ceremony. I don't know exactly how to say this word, but the potlatch was practiced on the west coast. So the Beothuk were on the east coast, Newfoundland, Labrador. The Potlatch Ceremony is on the west coast, right, BC. And the whole point of this ceremony is it's designed to give away and redistribute wealth. Okay, because even 500,000 years ago, even with indigenous groups, they realized that some people become more wealthy than others, for whatever reason. The wealth just accumulates into a small handful of people's hands. So what do you do about that? How do you make sure that everyone is surviving? Okay, well, they created ceremonies where they just gave it away. I also learned that in some situations they also destroy it. If they're really wealthy and they can really afford to, they'll just burn stuff. Maybe they'll offer it up to God or whatever. And so this was practiced by a variety of groups. And this ceremony, I think it talks about in the next slide, this ceremony, this practice was then limited by and restricted by the Canadian government. Okay, so we have done a big time jump here. These notes I still need to kind of touch up and improve on, so I do apologize for that. Okay. So in addition to just redistributing wealth, there was a lot of cultural, let's say, they acted out their culture at these ceremonies, whether it's through singing, dancing, some form of feast. They're utilizing this ceremony to act out their culture, right? To act out their traditions and values, right? So this would be like, how many of you celebrate Christmas? Okay. And so generally speaking, what does that look like? How many, you probably put up a tree, yeah, right? You have a day off, you spend that day with family, you maybe have a dinner, and there's some sort of gift giving. Right? And that tradition, when you practice that, you give it new life. Okay. So what if next year or this Christmas, for whatever reason, the government or whoever, someone said that, well, you're not allowed to put up a tree and give gifts. Would that still feel like Christmas? No. Not quite, right? So there's something important about the tree and the gift giving that's part of that tradition. Right? Let's say you didn't have a dinner with family. Would it? And everything else is the same, but you didn't have a dinner. Would it still feel like Christmas?
Kind of.
We're 50-50, right? So the food is maybe less associated with the holiday than the other aspects of it, right? But, if you start removing certain aspects of that celebration, then it takes away from the tradition, the ceremony, and the culture, right? And if you do that long enough, then Christmas changes, right? Over 2-3 generations, 25 to 75 years, it just becomes something else. Or maybe you forget about it entirely, or you just stop doing it, right? Yes. Okay. The other points we already talked about. Here's a photo. It's black and white, unfortunately, but take a look at what you're seeing. Look at these. In the background, we see these very beautifully carved totem poles, some very elaborate don't know if costume is the right word, but whatever they're wearing, their clothing, their traditional garb, for sure. I mean, look at this mask as well. These are carved. This looks like a goat head. I forget when this photo was taken, probably sometime in the 1900s. It'd be pretty wild seeing this ceremony, hey? Like with all of these masks, the way they're dressed up, and you know, the entire process. Okay. Here's a couple others. So up top, a photo from about 1946. Okay, these are the forest spirit dancers from Guilford Island. So again, you see there's more bird imagery in this one. Right. But look at their masks as well. They're drawing these like very big elaborate faces. Okay. I don't know when this bottom one was taken. Go ahead. But that's, you know, clearly a more modern ceremony. What is the biggest difference we're seeing in these ceremonies? What is the biggest difference we're seeing from these photos? What's that? Sure, color, right? Like one of the photos is in color. What about with the people? I mean, you can still see some people in the background. Right. Do you think they were more closely following their tradition here? So something must have happened in the 50 to 7,500 years in between that those photos were taken. Right? And people would argue that that's a loss of culture, potentially a genocide. So part of the impact that cultural contact had was the things that they were exchanging, what was considered valuable, shifted over time. And you know, part of that's going to make sense, right? Think about it this way. How many of you would trade your current cell phone for a flip phone? Some of us, right? It's always you two, eh? Okay. And that might be a decision based on personal beliefs. Like, hey, I would much rather have a flip phone and it's less distracting. How many of you would trade your current phone for the latest model of phone? Okay.
If I had one.
You know, a lot more. Sure. Like, would you trade that pencil for a phone? Right. Okay. So it's pretty natural that when you find things of more value, that you know, you would exchange those things then. And so when Europeans came over, they brought items like, you know, metal items, guns. They were also selling alcohol, which was quite devastating on the indigenous populations, tobacco as well. But they were selling them, they were trading with them, items that were now more valuable, maybe more useful as well. Okay. And so it shifted what was then considered valuable and what was exchanged in the indigenous ceremonies. Along with the like obviously I already mentioned, the government eventually banned potlatch ceremonies, so they didn't want indigenous people practicing their culture. So now again, you know, when you reduce and limit the people's ability to wear their traditional clothing, to sing their songs, to dance their dances because that was special for them, you're eroding what that practice is, right? It's just like telling people, well, you can celebrate Christmas, but you can't have a Christmas tree. Or whatever. I'm not culturally aware of a lot of other holidays, so I can't bring up other examples, but I think we understand Christmas well enough. So there is going to be a variety of reasons for why, you know, why the people who were coming to North America would have wanted to end this ceremony. Some of these I haven't fully verified. You know, this idea that, well, we need a labor force, so we can't have you sharing what you own. Where is this guy cutting grass now? Right there, of course. So I would have to verify the first point, but for sure, you know, the second point, the third point, I would say definitely apply this idea of, you know, let's bring people into this new culture, this new way of being that's existing here. Let's reduce their practices to eliminate that and prevent that. Okay. I'm going to see how many slides we have left. Maybe we'll stop. Okay, we'll wrap up with this slide. Okay.